Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Son of Frankenstein from 1939. Now, this is kind of one of the more forgotten Universal horror movies, and I think people don't realize how good the early Frankenstein sequels are. Although this is not directed by James Whale, and most of the cast who's not Boris Karloff is not there. It's been a while since James Whale was involved in everything. This is directed by Rowland V. Lee, and it has a pretty cool cast of Boris Karloff as the monster, uncredited, Basil Rathbone as the son of Frankenstein, and then Bela Lugosi as Igor. It actually opens with one of the reasons I actually saw this when I had Turner Classic Movies, and I saw the title card and it said those three names. I go, I mean, I can't not watch this. This sounds awesome. And it actually, I think, although it's not as, I've heard people get crazy about this. I don't think it's as good as the two James Whale ones, but it's like a really good attempt and a really interesting idea on how to keep it going, and it actually really works. And you can tell, like, this is 39, which is considered the greatest year in Hollywood history, and you can tell that like their techniques have grown. Like this film throughout the House of Frankenstein has like incredibly deep sets where like there's so much detail and so much going on and stuff. I actually really like how deep the sets are in that house. It's like a really cool feature of this movie. Actually, it's one of my favorite like Hollywood sets is looking at how deep this can get. But it's also like, I think it's interesting to see like where you would take it with a different director, how a studio director could do a good job with Frankenstein, believe it or not, even if they're not necessarily doing the James Whale one. Now, Son of Frankenstein is about Dr. Frankenstein's son is coming to town to sort of claim his inheritance of the castle. The town is not into him at all, hilariously so, as he says like stuff about his father. When he shows up, they all disperse. They don't want to hear his nonsense. He goes, finds his, with his wife and daughter, he finds his father's house and his laboratory that has parts of it still around. He finds Igor, played by Bela Lugosi, in a pretty cool role, and also finds the monster and decides he wants to sort of bring back the monster. Cosmic rays are involved somehow, which is strange, but okay. He wants to bring back the monster to show the legacy of his family, whereas Bela Lugosi uses the monster just to kill off the people who hung him a long time ago as retribution, and so forth, as they're trying to find the right thing to do with the monster and his own father's legacy before it tears him and the town apart. I do like Basil Rathbone in this. I only sort of know his Sherlock Holmes stuff. Bela Lugosi is really, really great in this role. I know people will consider this one of his better roles, and even his performance with Boris Karloff really works very well. But I think it works well as like a guy who doesn't really know what's going on. Like Basil Rathbone reminded me of what like a tech bro would be, where like he doesn't understand the ramifications of his actions. He just wants it with such determination, and this showed that very well. There's never a point during this movie where you thought the Son of Frankenstein guy was like right or correct or not someone driven by obsession, and I think that really works for it. This has a lot more of the town, in fact like a police commissioner with like a wooden arm, and they say things the monster is done, or Frankenstein's monster, whatever, that you never see happen on, you didn't see in the other two movies, you know, where they're getting that from, or if it's myth. I guess you can kind of read into that, because some of these people had seen re-releases of these, so they probably knew like continuity a little bit, but it does sort of play in its own like weird continuity thing, sort of an offshoot from them. It plays like it's a direct sequel, but it's not fully a direct sequel. Like, I liked how the town was more involved, because of course they would not like Frankenstein coming back. They would not be into that. You're like, oh cool, you're his kid and you're gonna rebuild stuff. Not interested. Like, I totally get where they're coming from. It's an interesting way to take it. You know, like the Friday the 13th films had a thing where they changed the name of Crystal Lake because it was so synonymous with the stabbing. And it's like similar things. You see that in other horror films. It was interesting seeing like this happen in one of those so early. I mean, it's 39. I particularly like how like Igor is like kind of the son of Frankenstein puts emphasis on like, oh, if only he hadn't gotten that killer's brain, this would have worked. I'm like, yeah, no, that was the issue, I guess. The grave robbing's fine, just like the fact that he picked the wrong brain. But then like drew alliances with them. Some of the logic in this is dropped clearly because the studio was like, no, that doesn't work. Like the ending just feels like we need to get out of here. Yeah, just wave to people. Let's go. It didn't feel as thought out as it really could have been. I liked seeing Boris Karloff. This is the last time you see him as the monster. There's some like offshoot appearances or whatever. But this is the last time he plays Frankenstein's monster. He's really good in this. He has a big furry coat for some reason. I'm not sure. At least he's insulated, I guess. I don't know. I think the wit of James Whale isn't there, although this does actually work really well and it's a lot of fun. And if you like the sort of lore of Frankenstein, it plays more with the lore than the other sequels did, or at least the few sequels I've seen of the Universal Monster stuff. But I've always looked at this as like the good successor of like, oh, the Frankenstein Universal stuff actually has a pretty solid franchise. I know they made other Universal Monster Frankenstein movies. Boris Karloff showed up in them, not under the makeup or anything. It is sad that this was sort of his last one. It feels like he could have said more, but I like the very compromised Frankenstein and like what he's gonna do and stuff like that. I really quite liked like the chemistry of all the actors, how many crazy characters there are, how many like, I think when you hear about, oh, the towns involved, that could sound really fucking dull. But it does, like, first it makes sense, like, in terms of towns and like political aspirations and stuff like that. But it also makes sense as like, yeah, you would just want to protect yourself after your town's had to deal with a monster a couple times. That's totally understandable. It makes a lot of sense. I like how this plays it. I think this was just like a big studio priority brought by a studio director, and I think it actually worked out. 39 was one of those magical years where you kind of feel like it could, particularly in the late 30s. Hollywood, was doing well, and like, this is the same year as Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, all that stuff. I think it was able to capture like, well, what do you do with Frankenstein at this point? And it feels like an interesting way to take it to the son of Frankenstein and like what he would do with the monster. Although it would have been interesting if he had different technological ideas and stuff like that, but you kind of just gotta let that go. While watching this, I did think like there's definitely going to be time where the tech bros are going to make dead bodies do slave labor or something, and that made me sad. Then I paused it and started to rewatch the movie and just thought about how like this is the same thing. A really well-intentioned guy comes to the community and says he's going to do great by it and bring up all these wonderful things, and in effect all you know that he's actually going to leave with is a weird monster, and then he'll move on. And that's sort of Son of Frankenstein. I do think if we're going to talk about top 10 Universal horror movies, monster movies, this would be close. This would be one of the top tier ones. Definitely a very good sequel. I would say like maybe around Dracula's Daughter. Quality wise, I don't think it's as good as Bride of Frankenstein, and I don't think it has as many sassy fun things to say as James Whale, but it is really good about like wealth and the idea of legacy and passed down and what your family means to you, and kind of the evil of that, how that could definitely be used for evil for Frankenstein. It's also weird that he thinks people want the monster back. I was like, no dude, they really do not want the monster back. I don't know why you keep thinking that's going to help the name. That is going to hurt the name. They're like, why'd your weird kid come back to bring back your monster and destroy this town? What's wrong with you? I like Basil Rathbone a lot. It was fun seeing Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff together in a great chemistry. I mean, seeing them sort of play two monsters, it's wonderful for all that. Obviously, see the other two movies first, but it's like a simple, like really tight kind of Universal monster movie with a really cool cast, maybe one of the best casts of all of the Universal monster movies. Then you can't really go wrong with this. It's not a bad movie. It's just a very decent attempt at it. Understood like what Frankenstein would mean to the next generation and so forth and so on. And I think like, especially one that lived in the shadow of it, it feels like they're trying to recapture it without understanding the logistics of it, which I think is probably something we should pass on now, frankly. But Son of Dracula is a very solid entry in the franchise. Yes, it's not James Whale, and it doesn't live up to those kind of films from before, but it is a very solid entry, and I think a very kind of solid. It's kind of fun seeing a studio film, just a solid piece of work. And Son of Frankenstein is very much that, and it's very good at it. Solid piece of work. It's a solid kind of pillar in the Universal horror kind of continuity franchise or whatever. I wish the rest of them had lived up to this, but hey, 3 good movies in one film series in 1939 is pretty amazing in itself, and I really did quite like every time I can deal with the Son of Frankenstein. It might not be the other two, might not be as classic or whatever, but it's one hell of a very well-made, controlled studio vibe, and if you're willing to go with it, I think Son of Frankenstein is a fun, good old Universal monster movie. So if you've seen Son of Frankenstein and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if